The massive Imperial cruiser floated in the darkness of space like a metal mountain, its hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could destroy entire planets. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge, his blue crystalline skin reflecting the light from 1,000 control panels. His forearms moved across the communication controls as he prepared to send a message that would change everything. "Open all channels," he commanded. His voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered 100 worlds. "Send this message to every Imperial vessel in the galaxy." The communication officer, a smaller alien with tentacles instead of hands, worked quickly at his station. "All channels open, Admiral. The entire fleet will receive your transmission." Vexitar looked out at the stars and took a deep breath. What he was about to announce would shock every being in the galaxy. "Attention all Imperial forces. By direct order of the High Council, all vessels are forbidden from entering the Sol system. No Imperial ship may approach within 50 light-years of the planet called Earth. Any captain who violates this order will face immediate destruction. This ban takes effect now and will remain until further notice." He paused, his hands shaking slightly. "Furthermore, all trade routes through human space are now closed. Any alien vessel found in contact with humans will be considered an enemy of the Empire. The humans of Earth are to be avoided at all costs." The transmission ended and silence filled the bridge. The crew exchanged nervous glances. In 3,000 years of Imperial history, they had never retreated from anyone. They had never issued a ban like this. But they all knew why it was necessary. 50 light-years away, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard Luna Station. The orbital platform circled Earth's moon, watching for any signs of alien activity. Jake was a typical human officer, with brown hair and green eyes that missed nothing. He had been fighting space pirates and protecting trade routes for 10 years. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies." "It's in the Imperial language," Jake frowned. The Empire rarely bothered to communicate with humans directly. "Put it through the translator, Amy. Let's hear what they have to say." The computer worked to translate the alien words into English. As the message played, Jake's eyes grew wide. Amy turned around in her chair, her dark hair falling across her face as she stared at him in confusion. "Sir, did they just say they're banning themselves from coming here?" Jake nodded slowly. "That's exactly what they said. And I want to know why." He stood up from his chair and walked to the main viewing screen. Earth hung below them like a blue and white jewel. "Send a copy of this transmission to Earth immediately. The President needs to hear this." On Earth, in the Global Science Institute in Geneva, Dr. Lisa Park was working late in her laboratory. She was one of the planet's leading experts on alien biology and behavior. Her computer beeped, alerting her to an urgent message. As she read the translation of the Imperial announcement, her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "Carl," she called to her colleague in the next room. "Carl, get in here right now." Dr. Carl Johnson rushed into the lab, his lab coat still covered in chemical stains from his experiments. "What's wrong, Lisa? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lisa pointed at her computer screen. "Read this. The Galactic Empire just banned all their ships from coming anywhere near Earth." Carl read the message twice, his eyebrows rising higher with each word. "This doesn't make sense. The Empire doesn't retreat from anyone. They've conquered half the galaxy. Why would they suddenly be afraid of us?" "That's what we need to find out," Lisa said, already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling the President's science advisor." "This isn't just strange, Carl, this is impossible. In all our studies of Imperial behavior, they've never shown fear of any species. Something has changed, and we need to know what." Meanwhile, on the frontier colony of New Denver, Farmer Ben Cooper was fixing a fence when his daughter Kate came running across the field. The colony was on the edge of human space where Imperial ships sometimes passed by on their way to distant worlds. "Dad," Kate shouted, pointing up at the sky. "Look at the ships." Ben shaded his eyes and looked up. 3 Imperial vessels that had been orbiting nearby for weeks were now moving away at high speed. Their engines glowed bright blue as they accelerated toward the edge of the system. "Well, I'll be," Ben muttered. "They're running like their tails are on fire." Kate was only 16, but she was smart enough to know this wasn't normal. "Dad, Imperial ships don't run from anything. What do you think happened?" Ben watched the ships disappear into the distance. "I don't know, sweetheart. But something tells me we're about to find out." Back on Luna Station, Jake was meeting with his senior officers. Commander Tracy White, his second in command, was reviewing all the intelligence reports they had on recent Imperial activity. "Sir," she said, "our scouts have been reporting strange behavior from Imperial ships for the past few weeks. Ships that were heading toward human space have been turning around. Trade vessels have been avoiding our shipping lanes. It's like they're afraid to come near us." Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "But afraid of what? We're just one species on one planet. They have thousands of worlds and millions of ships. What could possibly make them ban contact with us?" Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez spoke up from her station. "Captain, I've been monitoring Imperial communications. There's something else." The message wasn't just an order. There was emotion in the Admiral's voice. "Fear. Fear," Jake repeated. "The Empire doesn't know fear." "They do now," Amy said quietly. "Whatever happened, it scared them enough to avoid an entire sector of space just to stay away from us." On Earth, President John Miller was in an emergency meeting with his advisors. The Oval Office was filled with military officials, scientists, and intelligence experts, all trying to understand what the Imperial announcement meant. "Mr. President," said Intelligence Director Susan Wright, "we've confirmed that Imperial ships are retreating from all our border areas. Some of them are moving so fast they're damaging their own engines. But why?" the President asked. "What did we do?" Dr. Lisa Park, who had been called in as an expert, spoke up. "With respect, Mr. President, I don't think this is about what we did. I think this is about what we are. The Empire has been studying us for years. They know how humans behave, how we think, how we fight. Something about us has finally scared them." General Paul Anderson, the head of Earth's military forces, leaned forward. "Dr. Park, humans have been in space for less than a century. We have maybe 100 ships compared to their millions. How could we possibly scare them?" Lisa looked around the room at all the confused faces. "That's exactly what we need to find out. Because whatever it is, it's something the Empire has never encountered before. And that makes us either very dangerous or very valuable. Maybe both." As night fell over Earth, humans across the planet watched the news reports with a mixture of excitement and worry. For the first time in history, the mighty Galactic Empire was afraid of them, but nobody knew why. And until they figured it out, humanity would have to prepare for whatever came next. 3 weeks had passed since the Empire's strange announcement, and Dr. Lisa Park had barely slept. Her team at the Global Science Institute worked around the clock, trying to understand why the galaxy's most powerful empire would suddenly fear humanity. The answer came from an unexpected source. "Dr. Park." Carl Johnson burst into her office, waving a data pad. "We intercepted something. Imperial communications from 6 months ago. You need to see this right now." Lisa looked up from her computer, her eyes red from exhaustion. "What kind of communications?" "Military reports. Battle logs. And Lisa, they mention humans." Carl's hands were shaking as he handed her the data pad. "There was an incident. Something the Empire calls the Terran phenomenon." Lisa read through the translated reports, her heart beating faster with each word. "Get me a secure line to President Miller. And call Captain Morrison on Luna Station. They need to hear this." An hour later, Lisa was speaking to a room full of Earth's most important leaders through video screens. President Miller sat in the White House Situation Room, while Captain Jake Morrison joined from Luna Station. General Paul Anderson was there too, along with several other military commanders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lisa began, 6 months ago, one of our exploration ships encountered an Imperial vessel. The ship was called Terra Nova, commanded by Captain Alex Turner. President Miller frowned. "I remember approving that mission. They were supposed to survey the outer planets of the Kepler system." "What happened out there?" Lisa pulled up the Imperial battle reports on her screen. According to these logs, Captain Turner's ship detected an Imperial vessel that was transporting prisoners. Slaves from a dozen different alien species being taken to work in Empire mines. Captain Morrison leaned forward. "What did Turner do?" "He demanded their release," Lisa said. When the Imperial captain refused, Turner attacked. But here's where it gets interesting. The Terra Nova wasn't just fighting to win. They were fighting to save those prisoners, and somehow the aliens on that slave ship knew it. She brought up another document. The Imperial reports described something they'd never seen before. The prisoners started fighting back against their guards. Not just fighting, but fighting with what the Empire calls impossible courage. As if they believed they could actually win. General Anderson looked confused. "Prisoners fighting back, isn't that unusual? Desperate people do desperate things." "Not like this," Lisa said. Listen to this report from the Imperial captain. He says the prisoners were inspired by the humans, not just to fight but to believe that freedom was actually possible. The Empire had convinced these species that resistance was hopeless. But seeing humans risk their lives for strangers changed everything. President Miller was quiet for a moment. What happened to the Terra Nova? They won, Lisa said simply. A single human exploration ship defeated an Imperial warship 3 times its size. But that's not the important part. The important part is what happened next. She pulled up the final report. Captain Turner didn't just free those prisoners. He offered them passage to neutral space. But according to Imperial intelligence, most of them asked to join his crew instead. They wanted to fight alongside the humans. Jake Morrison whistled softly. How many prisoners were we talking about? 237 beings from 12 different species, Lisa read. And within a week, every single one had sworn loyalty to the human crew. Not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. Intelligence Director Susan Wright spoke up from her position in Washington. Dr. Park, are you saying the Empire is afraid of us because we're good at inspiring other species? I'm saying the Empire built their power on the idea that resistance is hopeless, Lisa replied. They've spent 3,000 years convincing every species in the galaxy that fighting back will only make things worse. But humans don't think that way. She stood up and began pacing. When we see injustice, we fight it. When we see someone in trouble, we help them. And when other species see us doing these things, they start to believe they can do them too. President Miller looked grim. So we're a threat to their entire system of control. Exactly. Look at these intelligence reports from the past 6 months. Lisa brought up a map of the galaxy. 17 star systems have declared independence from the Empire. All of them cite human ideals of freedom and dignity. We've become a symbol of rebellion without even trying. General Anderson studied the map. These systems are nowhere near Earth. How are they even hearing about us? Word travels fast in space, Captain Morrison said. Traders, merchants, pirates. Stories about the Terra Nova incident have spread across half the galaxy, and apparently other species like what they're hearing. Susan Wright was reading through more intelligence reports. There's something else. The Empire tried to suppress news of the Terra Nova incident, but that just made it spread faster. Now they're dealing with resistance movements on dozens of worlds, all inspired by human actions. Lisa nodded. The Empire's worst nightmare isn't a powerful enemy they can defeat in battle. It's an idea they can't destroy. And we've given every oppressed species in the galaxy a very dangerous idea. Which is? President Miller asked. That they don't have to accept being oppressed, Lisa said. That freedom is worth fighting for even against impossible odds. That's what makes humans dangerous to the Empire. Not our weapons or our technology, but our refusal to give up hope. Captain Morrison was looking at tactical reports from the frontier. Dr. Park, if this is true, then the Empire's ban makes perfect sense. They're not trying to protect us from them. They're trying to protect themselves from us. But it's not working, Susan Wright added. My sources in the intelligence community say that despite the official ban, contact between humans and alien species is actually increasing. There are rumors of secret meetings, underground networks, resistance cells getting support from human smugglers. General Anderson looked worried. If the Empire realizes their containment strategy is failing, what will they do next? Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. They'll decide that isolating us isn't enough. They'll try to eliminate the source of the problem entirely. President Miller stood up. You mean they'll attack Earth? It's the logical next step, Lisa said. They can't stop the spread of human ideals as long as humans exist, and they can't afford to let this rebellion continue growing. Jake Morrison was already thinking tactically. How long do we have? Unknown, Susan Wright said. But my analysts think we have months, not years. The Empire is mobilizing resources. They're calling in ships from across the galaxy. President Miller looked around the room at his advisors. Then we need to prepare. General Anderson, I want our defenses ready. Captain Morrison, coordinate with our colonial forces. Dr. Park, keep monitoring their communications. There's one more thing, Lisa said quietly. According to these reports, Captain Alex Turner and the Terra Nova are still out there. They've been operating in Imperial space for 6 months, freeing slaves and inspiring rebellions. The Empire has put a massive bounty on their heads. On how massive? The President asked. Enough to buy a small planet, Lisa replied. But so far, no one has claimed it. In fact, Some Imperial captains have started defecting to join Turner's crew. The Empire is losing control and they know it. As the meeting ended, everyone understood that humanity stood at a crossroads. They had accidentally started a galactic revolution simply by being themselves. The Empire would not let that continue. War was coming whether humanity wanted it or not. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire was afraid. And that fear might be humanity's greatest weapon of all. The asteroid base on Ceres looked like any other mining operation from the outside. But hidden deep inside the rocky surface was the most important secret facility in human space. Commander Tim Bradley walked through the narrow corridors, checking on the communication equipment that kept Earth connected to the growing rebellion across the galaxy. Tim had been chosen to lead this operation because he understood something that most military officers didn't. Sometimes, the most important battles weren't fought with weapons but with words and hope. The Empire had banned contact with humans, but they couldn't stop humans from reaching out to those who needed help. "Commander," called Pilot Officer Karen Mitchell from the communication center. "We've got 3 new resistance cells requesting supplies. 1 on Vega Prime, 1 near the Centauri cluster, and 1 in the Rigel system." Karen was one of the best pilots in the human fleet, and the only one crazy enough to fly supply missions deep into Imperial space. Her ship, the Midnight Runner, was small and fast, built for stealth rather than fighting. She had been making these dangerous runs for 2 months now, and somehow she always made it back. Tim looked at the star map on the wall. Red dots showed Imperial strongholds, while blue dots marked known resistance groups. There were a lot more blue dots than there had been 3 weeks ago. "What do they need?" he asked. "Medical supplies, communication equipment, and information about Imperial troop movements," Karen replied. "The usual stuff. But Commander, there's something else. The resistance leaders want to coordinate their efforts. They're talking about planning simultaneous uprisings across multiple systems." Tim nodded. "That's what we were afraid of. If they move too fast, the Empire will crush them before they can organize properly." "Maybe," Karen said. "But if they don't move fast enough, the Empire will hunt them down one by one. These people are risking everything just by talking to us." On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Foster crouched in an abandoned tunnel, waiting for the human supply ship to arrive. She had been an Imperial scientist until 6 months ago, when she learned what the Empire really did to conquered species. Now she led one of the largest resistance cells in this sector of space. "Are you sure they're coming?" asked Danny Clark, a former miner who had become her second in command. The big man was nervous, constantly checking the tunnel entrance for Imperial patrols. "They'll come," Elena said confidently. "Humans keep their promises. That's why this whole rebellion started." She was right. An hour later, Karen Mitchell's ship landed in a hidden canyon outside the mining complex. Karen and her crew of 3 worked quickly to unload medical supplies and communication equipment, while Elena briefed them on Imperial activities in the system. "The Empire is getting desperate," Elena explained. "They've tripled the number of patrols and they're executing anyone suspected of rebel activity. But it's not working. Every time they kill someone, 10 more people join us." Karen listened while her crew finished the unloading. "How many active resistance members do you have now?" "About 800 on this world alone," Danny said. "And we're in contact with groups on 12 other planets in this system. The Empire thought they could scare us into submission, but they're only making us angrier." Meanwhile, on the Imperial capital world of Zephyria Prime, Chancellor Mordak paced angrily in his council chamber. The massive alien leader was 12 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that changed color with his emotions. Right now it was a deep, angry red. "Explain to me again how a species that barely knows how to travel between stars is destroying our empire," he growled at his security chief. Zareth, a reptilian creature with yellow eyes, shifted nervously. "Chancellor, the humans aren't destroying anything directly. They're simply existing, and their existence is inspiring others to rebel." "Then we eliminate their existence," Mordak snapped. "How difficult can it be to destroy one small planet?" "More difficult than you might think," Zareth replied carefully. "Our intelligence reports show that humans have been preparing for war. They've mobilized their entire fleet and begun fortifying their colonies. More importantly, they have allies now." Mordak's skin grew even redder. "Allies? What allies?" 17 systems have officially declared independence and pledged to defend Earth if we attack. Dozens more are providing intelligence and supplies to human operations. Some of our own captains are defecting to join them. On Mars, General Paul Anderson met with Admiral Lisa Thompson to review Earth's defensive preparations. The Red Planet had become humanity's main military base, with shipyards working around the clock to build new vessels. "How many ships do we have ready for combat?" Paul asked. 43 vessels of various sizes," Lisa replied. "The Empire has over 50,000 ships, but most of them are scattered across the galaxy dealing with rebellions." Paul studied the tactical displays. "What about our colonial forces?" "Every human colony has organized local defense forces. They're not professional military, but they're motivated, and we've been getting weapons and supplies from some very interesting sources." She brought up a list on her computer. "Former Imperial worlds that have declared independence are sharing technology with us. Some of their weapons are actually better than what the Empire uses." Back on Ceres, Commander Tim Bradley was coordinating with intelligence operative Tony Garcia and his partner Dr. Angela Price. Tony worked for Earth's intelligence service, while Angela was a linguist who specialized in alien communications. "We've intercepted something big," Tony said, handing Tim a decoded message. "The Empire is mobilizing a massive fleet. They're calling ships back from frontier duties and assembling them at Zephyria Prime." Angela looked up from her translation work. "Tony, show him the other message. The one about the timeline." Tony nodded grimly. "They're planning to break their own ban. Full-scale assault on Earth and all human colonies. The attack is scheduled for 6 weeks from now." Tim felt his stomach drop. 6 weeks? "That's not enough time to prepare proper defenses." "It gets worse," Angela said. "They're not just planning to destroy our military forces. They want to eliminate humanity entirely. They think it's the only way to stop the rebellions." Across the galaxy, resistance leaders received urgent messages from the Ceres base. The humans were sharing the intelligence they had gathered, warning their allies about the coming Imperial assault. But they also included something else in those messages. "We won't run," Karen Mitchell said into her communication equipment as she broadcast to resistance cells across 3 star systems. "Earth will stand and fight. And if anyone wants to stand with us, we'd be honored to have you." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships began moving toward human space from dozens of worlds. Former Imperial officers brought their vessels and crews. Resistance fighters commandeered whatever ships they could find. Even species that had never worked together before united around a single goal: stopping the Empire from destroying the humans who had given them hope. Dr. Elena Foster stood in her hidden base on Kepler 442b, looking at the messages flooding in from across the galaxy. "Danny, I think we're about to see something that's never happened before." "What's that?" the big miner asked. "A fair fight," Elena replied. "For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire is going to face an enemy that believes it can win." On Earth, President Miller addressed the world in a televised speech. "My fellow humans, we face the greatest challenge in our history. The Galactic Empire has decided that our very existence is a threat to their power. They're probably right. We refuse to accept that oppression is natural or that freedom is impossible." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "We didn't ask for this fight, but we won't run from it. And we won't face it alone. Across the galaxy, beings who were once subjects of the Empire are now our allies. They're coming to stand with us not because we asked them to, but because they believe in what we represent." As the speech ended, humans across Earth and the colonies looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Empire was preparing to destroy them. But also out there, former enemies were becoming friends, united by the simple human belief that everyone deserved to be free. The underground resistance had become something much bigger. It had become a revolution that would decide the future of the galaxy. The fragile peace shattered when the emergency signal reached Ceres base. Commander Tim Bradley read the message 3 times before he could believe what it said. Karen Mitchell, their best pilot and the heart of the resistance supply network, had been captured during a mission to Proxima Centauri b. "How did this happen?" Tim demanded, staring at the communication from the Proxima colony. "Imperial trap," replied Tony Garcia, his face grim. They knew she was coming. Someone must have betrayed the mission. Dr. Angela Price was already working on her computer, translating intercepted Imperial communications. "It's worse than that. They're taking her to Rigel 7. That's their most secure prison fortress. No one has ever escaped from there." Tim slammed his fist on the table. "We can't just leave her there. Karen has risked her life dozens of times for this rebellion. She saved thousands of people. And if we try to rescue her, we'll lose ships we need for Earth's defense, Tony pointed out. The Imperial fleet is already moving toward our space. We can't afford to waste resources on a rescue mission that's probably impossible anyway. But Tim wasn't listening to military logic. He was thinking like a human. Get me Admiral Morrison on Luna Station, and contact every resistance cell in the galaxy. I want them to know what happened. When Jake Morrison appeared on the communication screen, his face was already hard with determination. I heard about Karen, we're going after her. Jake, it's a suicide mission, Tim said. Rigel 7 is in the heart of Imperial space. They'll have hundreds of ships guarding it. Then we'll need hundreds of ships to get through, Jake replied simply. How many can we gather? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours of Karen's capture becoming known, ships began arriving at the meeting point near Alpha Centauri. Not just human ships, but vessels from across the galaxy. Former Imperial officers brought their crews. Resistance fighters arrived in converted cargo ships. Even species that had been enemies for centuries put aside their differences to join the rescue mission. Captain Neil Brown was one of the first to arrive. He was a saurian, a reptilian species that had served the Empire for over 1,000 years. But 6 months ago, he had seen how humans treated prisoners of war, including captured Imperial soldiers. Instead of executing them or torturing them for information, the humans had given them medical care and eventually released them with messages for their families. Neil had never seen such behavior from any military force. Captain Morrison, Neil said as his ship docked with the human fleet, my crew and I volunteer for this mission. We know Imperial tactics and security procedures. We can help. Jake was amazed at how quickly the fleet was growing. Captain Brown, why are you doing this? Karen is human. She's not one of your people. Neil's reptilian features formed what might have been a smile. Captain, I learned something from humans. When someone risks their life to save others, they become everyone's people. On Rigel the 7th, Karen sat in her cell, trying not to think about what the Imperial interrogator would do to her next. Velnash was a master of psychological torture, skilled at breaking prisoners without leaving physical marks. For 3 days he had been trying to get information about the Resistance Network. Tell me about the human base at Ceres, Velnash said, his insect-like features clicking as he spoke. Give me the access codes and I will make your death quick. Karen looked up at him with defiant eyes. I've got a better idea. Why don't you tell me why the mighty Galactic Empire is so afraid of a few humans with old ships and stubborn attitudes? Velnash struck her across the face. You humans think you're special. You think your naive ideals about freedom and justice make you superior, but you're nothing more than animals who haven't learned their place yet. Maybe, Karen said, tasting blood in her mouth. But we're the animals that taught your slaves they don't have to stay slaves. And that scares you more than any weapon we could build. Meanwhile, the rescue fleet was moving through Imperial space using intelligence provided by defected officers. Colonel Andy Roberts, Jake's tactical expert, studied the fortress layout while Commander Tracy White coordinated with their alien allies. The prison is built into an asteroid, Andy explained to the fleet commanders, heavily shielded with weapon platforms that can destroy capital ships. The only way in is through a narrow approach channel that's constantly monitored. Captain Brown shared his knowledge of Imperial procedures. They'll have patrol ships scattered throughout the system, but most Imperial captains are overconfident. They don't expect anyone to be crazy enough to attack Rigel 7. Then they don't know humans very well, Jake said grimly. The attack began at dawn, Rigel 7 time. The rescue fleet dropped out of hyperspace in 3 waves, with human ships leading the charge while their alien allies provided covering fire. The Imperial forces were caught completely off guard, but something unexpected happened during the battle. As the fighting intensified, entire Imperial units began switching sides. Ship after ship turned their weapons away from the rescue fleet and started attacking their own command vessels. What's happening out there? Jake asked his communications officer. Sir, we're receiving messages from Imperial ships. They're declaring for the Resistance. They say they're tired of serving an empire that fears its own people. The fortress itself proved to be heavily defended, but the rescue teams had an advantage the Empire didn't expect. Among the prisoners on Rigel 7 were beings from dozens of species, all captured for resistance activities. When they heard that humans were coming to rescue one of their own, they started a prison riot that distracted the guards. Karen was being moved to a new cell when the explosion started. She broke free from her guards during the confusion, and fought her way toward the surface levels. She wasn't trying to escape, just trying to help the rescue mission succeed. The final assault on the prison was led by Jake Morrison himself, fighting alongside former Imperial officer Neil Brown and a dozen other volunteers. They found Karen helping other prisoners escape even though she was barely able to stand. "Karen!" Jake called as laser fire erupted around them. "We need to get out of here." "Not without the others," she replied, supporting an injured alien prisoner. These people were captured fighting for freedom. "We don't leave anyone behind." The rescue succeeded, but it came at a terrible cost. 12 ships were destroyed, and over 300 beings died in the fighting. But they had saved not just Karen, but over 1,000 political prisoners from across the galaxy. More importantly, the galaxy had seen something that changed everything. Humans had risked a significant portion of their fleet to save a single person. They had fought their way into the most secure prison in Imperial space, not for military advantage, but because they believed no one should be abandoned. Dr. Peter King, monitoring galactic communications from Earth, couldn't believe the reports he was receiving. 43 star systems have declared independence in the past week. 17 Imperial admirals have defected with their entire fleets. There are reports of uprisings on over 100 worlds. The Empire's worst fears had come true. The rescue mission had inspired beings across the galaxy to believe that resistance was not only possible, but that they would not face it alone. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together. Former Imperial officers were teaching resistance fighters how to use captured Imperial weapons. Even more shocking was the defection of Hive Master Zurgak, the Empire's own propaganda minister. The massive insectoid creature had witnessed how humans treated captured Imperial soldiers during the rescue, showing them the same compassion they showed their own wounded. It was behavior so alien to Imperial thinking that Zurgak couldn't understand it. "These humans," he announced in his final broadcast before defecting, "show mercy to their enemies and risk everything for their friends. They fight not for conquest but for ideals. The Empire has no defense against such beings, because we have forgotten what it means to believe in something greater than ourselves." Chancellor Mordak received the news of the Rigel 7 disaster in his council chamber. His skin had turned so dark with rage that he looked like a living shadow. "How many ships did we lose?" he demanded. "Over 200 vessels destroyed or captured," Zarath reported. "But Chancellor, the ships are not the real problem. The real problem is that half the galaxy watched humans risk everything to save one person. They're calling it the greatest rescue mission in galactic history." Mordak stood up, his forearms clenched into fists. "Then we end this now. No more delays, no more strategies. We mobilize every ship in the Imperial fleet and destroy Earth. If we eliminate the humans, their rebellion dies with them." "Chancellor," Zarath said carefully, "many of our own people are starting to question whether we're fighting for the right cause." Mordak's eyes blazed with fury. "Then they will learn what happens to those who question the Empire. Send the order. All ships are to converge on Earth. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who dare to inspire hope." As the Imperial fleet began its final mobilization, humanity prepared for the ultimate test. They had accidentally started a galactic revolution simply by being themselves. Now they would discover whether their ideals were strong enough to survive when the entire Empire came to destroy them. 1 year after the Empire's original ban, Chancellor Mordak stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Emperor's Will. Around him stretched the largest fleet in galactic history. Over 30,000 ships had answered his call for the final assault on Earth. But even as he watched his vast armada, doubt gnawed at his mind. "Status report," he commanded his fleet coordinator. "All ships are in position, Chancellor. We have enough firepower to reduce Earth to cosmic dust within hours." Mordak nodded, but his satisfaction was hollow. In the past year, over half of the Empire's member worlds had declared independence. His own officers were defecting daily. Even some of the ships in this very fleet contained crews of questionable loyalty. The humans had to be destroyed today, or there would be no Empire left to save. On Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated the planet's defense from a command center buried deep beneath the Swiss mountains. President John Miller stood beside him, watching the tactical displays that showed the approaching Imperial fleet. "How many ships do we have?" the president asked. 47 human vessels, Jake replied. "But we're not alone." As if to prove his point, the space around Earth began filling with ships from across the galaxy. Former Imperial vessels flew alongside converted cargo ships and ancient warships that some species had kept hidden for centuries. The fleet that gathered to defend humanity was unlike anything ever seen in galactic history. "My God," General Paul Anderson breathed, watching the display. "How many are there?" "Over 8,000 ships so far," Jake said, "and more are arriving every hour." Leading the alien fleet was Captain Neil Brown in his converted Imperial cruiser. Beside him flew Dr. Elena Foster in a ship crewed by former slaves she had helped free. Even Captain Alex Turner had returned from his long campaign in Imperial space, bringing with him a fleet of liberated worlds and freed prisoners who had sworn to fight for human ideals. On the bridge of his ship, Neil Brown opened a communication channel to all the defending vessels. "This is Captain Brown to all Allied forces. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the idea that freedom is worth defending. The Empire believes that might makes right. Let's show them they're wrong." The battle began when the Imperial fleet reached the edge of the solar system. Chancellor Mordak had expected to face desperate resistance from a few human ships. Instead, he found himself confronting a united galaxy. "How is this possible?" he roared as his tactical officer reported the enemy numbers. "Where did all these ships come from?" "They're from everywhere, Chancellor," the officer replied nervously. "Former Imperial worlds, resistance cells, even some of our own defected fleets. They're all fighting under human command." The fighting was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of the organized formations typical of Imperial warfare, the defending fleet fought with the chaotic courage that humans had taught them. Ships that had been enemies for centuries worked together seamlessly, united by their shared belief in the human ideals of freedom and dignity. Chief Engineer Maya Santos, now captain of her own vessel, led a mixed squadron of human and alien ships against the Imperial dreadnought Devastator. Her crew included beings from 7 different species, all working together with the efficiency that humans inspired in others. "Target their shield generators," she ordered. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to show them there's a better way." Even in the heat of battle, the defenders followed human rules of engagement. Imperial ships that surrendered were protected. Escape pods were rescued regardless of which side they came from. Wounded enemies received medical care alongside wounded allies. This behavior confused and demoralized the Imperial forces. They had been taught that enemies were to be destroyed without mercy. But the humans and their allies fought with a combination of determination and compassion that Imperial training had never prepared them to face. "Chancellor," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from over 200 of our own ships. Their crews are asking to join the defense fleet." Mordak's skin had turned almost black with rage. "Destroy any Imperial ship that attempts to surrender. If they won't fight for the Empire, they'll die for it." But even that order backfired. When Imperial ships began firing on their own surrendering vessels, entire battle groups switched sides. The sight of the Empire destroying its own people for wanting peace was more effective than any human propaganda. The turning point came when the Emperor's will itself came under attack. Maya Santos led the assault, but she wasn't trying to destroy the massive flagship. Instead, she targeted its communication arrays and command systems, trying to disable rather than destroy. "Chancellor Mordak," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I'm Captain Maya Santos of the Terran Defense Force. I'm offering you and your crew safe passage to neutral space if you surrender now. This war doesn't have to end with more death." Mordak was stunned. "You're offering me terms? I came here to destroy your entire species." "I know," Maya replied calmly. "But that doesn't mean we have to destroy you. Humans believe everyone deserves a chance to choose a better path." Around the flagship, the battle was winding down. Imperial ships were surrendering faster than they could be processed. Those that continued fighting found themselves increasingly outnumbered as their own allies switched sides. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Park monitored the communications from across the galaxy. "President Miller, you need to hear this. Independence movements are starting on over 300 Imperial worlds. The Empire's own propaganda network is broadcasting human ideals instead of Imperial doctrine. The end came not with a final climactic battle, but with a simple choice. Hive Master Zurgak, the former Imperial propaganda minister who had defected months earlier, broadcast a message to every Imperial ship. "Soldiers of the Empire," he said, his insectoid voice carrying across the galaxy, "look around you. You are fighting against beings who offer mercy to their enemies and freedom to their friends. You are fighting for leaders who destroy their own people for wanting peace. Ask yourselves, which side represents the galaxy you want to live in? One by one, Imperial ships stopped fighting. Some surrendered, others simply withdrew from the battle. Within hours, the largest fleet in galactic history had dissolved as its crews chose hope over fear. Chancellor Mordak found himself alone on his flagship, surrounded by ships offering him safe passage if he would just give up his war. In the end, even he couldn't argue with the simple logic of the situation. The empire he had tried to save no longer existed. Half the galaxy had chosen to follow human ideals instead of Imperial force. 6 months after the battle for Earth, Captain Alex Turner stood in the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Haven Station. Representatives from over 1,000 worlds had gathered to establish the Galactic Council of Free Worlds. He had been chosen as humanity's first ambassador, though he still couldn't quite believe it. "We didn't set out to start a revolution," he said in his speech to the assembly. "We just did what seemed right. When we saw injustice, we fought it. When we saw people in need, we helped them. When we saw hope was dying, we tried to keep it alive." The audience included beings from hundreds of species, many of whom had been enemies just a year before, but they all had one thing in common now. They believed that freedom and dignity were worth fighting for. Dr. Lisa Park, now serving as Earth's chief scientific advisor to the Council, published her final report on what humans had called the Terran phenomenon. "The Empire made a fundamental error," she wrote. "They assumed that power came from fear and control. But humans proved that the strongest power comes from inspiring others to believe in something better than themselves." Karen Mitchell, fully recovered from her ordeal in Imperial prison, established the Galactic Rescue Service. Its mission was simple: no being would ever be abandoned, whether human or alien, friend or former enemy. The organization's ships carried crews from dozens of species, all united by the human principle that everyone deserved help when they needed it. On the former imperial capital of Zephyria Prime, a statue was erected in the central square. It showed a human and an alien standing together, looking up at the stars. The inscription read, "To those who taught us that the galaxy belongs to all who believe in freedom." Former Chancellor Mordak, living quietly in exile on a peaceful farming world, sometimes looked up at that statue and wondered how everything had changed so quickly. The answer, he had finally realized, was that it hadn't changed quickly at all. The desire for freedom had always been there, in every species and on every world. Humans had simply reminded the galaxy that such desires were worth fighting for. The Galactic Empire was gone, replaced by a federation of free worlds that governed themselves according to principles humans had never intended to export. That every being had value, that freedom was better than security, and that hope was stronger than fear. Years later, when historians studied the fall of the Empire and the rise of the free worlds, they would mark the beginning not with any battle or declaration, but with a simple imperial announcement: Galactic Empire bans entry into Terran space. It was the moment when fear had tried to contain hope, and hope had proven stronger. The galaxy had learned what made humans truly dangerous: not their weapons or their tear,